Yeah, well, today I need to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. Uh, Sodom and Gomorrah is in the Bible, the book of Genesis. And at the time of the patriarch Abraham, let's say around 2000 BC, around, well, in Palestine, in Dead Sea, around the Dead Sea area in Palestine, there used to be a collection of magnificent cities. Now, if you look at the geography of the area, there's the tip of the Red Sea on the Gulf of Aqaba, which divides what's called the plateau, the Sinai Peninsula from the Arabian Peninsula, and there's this a channel called, it's quite a wide sea, called the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, the Gulf of Aqaba is, well, right at the tip of the Gulf of Aqaba is a town called Aqaba, where today it's called, in Arabic, it's Aqaba, and there's an Israeli town called Eilat, and this tip of the Gulf of Aqaba is the southernmost tip of the political state of Israel. But if you look at the map, look at the geography, it's well known that there's this continental plates, and it's an extension of the Great Rift Valley in Africa, which goes north, and you have these deep series of deep valleys that go north and south, and the valley which the Dead Sea is in is an extension of the Gulf of Aqaba, and keeps on going north all the way to Mount Hermon in basically in Lebanon and Syria. Because in times past there was no permanent, I understand, no permanent Suez Canal. So one of the difficulties of all the trading goods from India and Africa and the East, one of the difficulties of getting ships carrying goods to Europe is to get them either go around the bottom of Africa, or you try to get through Egypt, like this some kind of Suez Canal arrangement, or you can drop off goods at Aqaba and have them taken by camel train to cities in Palestine, Jerusalem, or Sodom and Gomorrah and Zeboim, and what the book of Genesis calls the cities of the plain. Now, it stands to reason that a city, because the book of Genesis says that the plain of the Jordan, the valley of the Jordan, was well watered in the time of Abraham, is perfectly credible to my view or anyone's, because the There's this great big escarpment called on the Transjordan, which makes up, well, now politically speaking, it's the country of Jordan, and there's a series of towns up and down the tableland. Well, in times past, it used to be called Edom and Moab and Ammon and Bashan, and Gilead and Bashan, and what's now called the Golan Heights. But there's this plateau which is well watered, and it gets a lot of snow in winter, and so it's quite. And there's a lot of rivers that feed into the Jordan River. So there's actually a lot of water in the Jordan system, but so it's quite. And there's if you stand at Masada, if you go on the tour to Masada, which isn't hard, because if you're in Jerusalem, and you can probably get a day tour to Masada for $100, just down the road, really, a couple hours. But if you go to Masada and you get on you either do the hike or you get on the cable car and you go up to top of Masada, and you look east, you will see the Dead Sea and the plains around it. And almost at your feet, as it were, is this magnificent, what looks like a magnificent ruined city full of ancient terraces and monuments and temples. There's this gleaming white ash city. It's called ash. It's this gleaming white city that it looks like a ruin. It's made up of this brilliant white calcium sulfate. Now and there's a number of places, similar spots around the Dead Sea, and Genesis 14 implies that the cities of the plain were distributed about the Dead Sea. Sodom, Gommorah, Zoar to the south, and Admah and Zeboim further north. And there is another site where you see these white hillocks, with this collection of white hillocks right at the northern tip of the Dead Sea, which is called Admah. And there's another one further up near the Allenby Bridge. When I was there, from memory, I haven't got a photo. But it stands to reason that a number of things. A city, well, first of all, there's evidence of very dense human occupation of the area of the Dead Sea. Because there's this thing called the Bab edh necropolis on the eastern shore of the Dead Sea, which is got millions of skeletons buried in caves and holes in the ground, and it's quite dry there. So these skeletons have been preserved, along with the whatever trinkets and pots and things were thrown in with the bodies. Now there's millions of these bodies in this giant necropolis, or just like a giant cemetery, which is undeniable evidence of very dense human urban occupation of the Dead Sea area. And it's from Masada and the Gommorah, we'll call it, site. It's just there's a sort of small isthmus across the Dead Sea where you could it's quite easy to get any kind of wagon or camel train across to the other side to bury bodies. Anyway, it stands to reason that, I mean, there are tar pits or petroleum deposits in the Vale of Sodom, as it says in the book of Genesis 14. And these have actually there's been a lot of sinkholes showing up in the southern Dead Sea area recently, because they've been pumping out so much water from the Jordan for agriculture and irrigation projects that it's affected the water table, and there's a lot of sinkholes now in what's called Mount Sodom. Now, some people have a difficulty saying that these piles of what looks like, this eroded calcium sulfate deposits, they've ended up looking like an ancient city. And some people say, well, big deal. There's all kinds of geological areas, eroded or whatever, in the world that end up looking like a ruined city. But anyway, the fact is there's, well, first of all, there's a great deal of petroleum deposits, and there was a great deal of agriculture and irrigation there. For example, there's the famous En-Gedi Spring on the shores of the Dead Sea, where they've had agriculture projects there for millennia. And there's so many washes and wadis and valleys in the western shore of the Dead Sea. It'd be quite easy to have numerous dams and reservoirs to store water. And because so much water flows down the streams from what's called, now Israel, it used to be called Judea, you could have quite a lot of water and it would support quite a high population in quite big cities. And stands to reason that cities so situated would be very wealthy. And the ruins of Sodom and Gommorah are the ruins of just magnificent cities. Which brings me to limestone, because that whole escarpment of on which Jerusalem is built, the westward side of the Jordan, that whole escarpment is made of limestone. And if you go to Jerusalem, you'll see the old walls, which were eventually rebuilt by the Turks in the 16th, 17th century. The Turks rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem in limestone, and there's limestone all over that part of the world. And you would imagine the city walls of Sodom and Gomorrah were made of magnificent limestone blocks. now, I mean, and because there was so much trade of goods coming up by ship from Africa and India, so much trade coming up the Gulf of Aqaba, and the ships would unload their goods at Aqaba and put them on camel trains, and the camel trains would just simply, it's a straight shot up the valley to Sodom and Gommorah. It's pretty hot in winter, in summer, but it's a straight shot up the valley, and these goods could be either, the camel trains could either go on to up the Jordan Valley and go up to, make their way around to the Valley of Jezreel area and end up in Phoenician towns like Tyre and Sidon to be to be sold on, to be traded on with places in the Mediterranean. So this is, so Sodom and Gommorah formerly were sitting on trade routes, very wealthy, very rich trade routes, and the Gulf of Aqaba could have been the focus of a great deal of convergence, a great deal of convergence of trade routes at one point. So it seems to me, quite stands to reason that Sodom and Gommorah, or any like Jericho, or cities so situated, were extremely wealthy and could support some magnificent building projects. Well, I've even got a photo of, people say that, well, this is just the calcium sulfate layer, ash that these sites contain. They say that that's just a natural phenomenon, but I've actually got a photo of a burned log sitting in the layers, so to speak, which is curious. And I haven't got a sample of the stuff I brought back with me, but the thing about all the sites is they've made up this really crumbly, layered ash sort of, but it turns out that limestone is a sedimentary rock, which is made of layers itself. So limestone blocks comprising a magnificent edifice of city walls and towers and temples and terraces. They are naturally layered because because limestone is sedimentary. Anyway, so there's but what people have discovered at Sodom and Gommorah is these sulfur bowls, which an ancient historian, first century, Flavius Josephus, mentions the sulfur bowls in these cities of ash, where you can dig out, just find in washouts these what look like walnuts, and it turned out they're like a walnut of glassified material, and you can crack them open and they contain a ball of sulfur. And scores of people have taken these sulfur to labs in America and Europe and elsewhere, and they've tested the sulfur and found it to be very pure. Now there's millions of these sulfur balls, and you can dig them out of the walls of Sodom and Gommorah, and they're these nuggets, and you can crack them open and you can set the sulfur on fire, which is a trick people do all the time. And a lot of people souvenir these sulfur balls from gullies where they wash into, they sort of collect in gullies in heavy rains. But there's millions and millions of these sulfur balls, and they've sort of gone zoop, and seem to have been burning hot, and they went into the ash a couple of feet, and then they were so hot that they melted all the material around them into glass, and then the fire was extinguished by lack of oxygen. But there's millions of these sulfur balls embedded in the walls of Sodom and Gommorah, which Josephus called them fruits because they were like walnuts. But but they, to this day, thousands of people can just go through and collect these things and set them on fire and take a video. And there's thousands of those on the internet. Now, this presents. Now, it's very hard to actually explain this phenomenon in any way other than the way the Bible says, that Abraham's nephew Lot went there with his wife and daughters, and he had 2 sons-in-law. And the people were so evil, God determined that he was going to destroy the 5 cities of the plain. And he sent angels to warn Lot to run away, take his family and run away, and they ran away at the last minute, and they were running away towards Zoar, the city at the south, and famously Lot's wife turned around and to look at the destruction of Sodom, and she was turned into a pillar of salt because God had commanded them not to look back. Now, people regard this as a mythical tale, but in fact it's very difficult to explain the phenomena, the actual extant evidence in any sort of scientific theory. There's no scientific rationalization. It seems undeniable that these cities were burned by God supernaturally. People, like, yeah. Till later.